After 13 races and many squandered opportunities, Ferrari has finally won a race this season through Charles Leclerc at the Belgian Grand Prix. I'm joined by Ed Straw and Ben Anderson to talk about the meaning of this win. So obviously at the beginning of the season, Charles Leclerc was talking about how he had to change Ferrari's mind in terms of the pecking order between the two drivers. So now he's won a race. What is his standing in the team now, Ed?
Well, he is the driver in the ascendancy. He's the form man. Not only has he had the first win, he's also been the superior Ferrari driver on balance over the past half dozen or so races. He's out-qualified Vettel every time. He was well ahead of Vettel in qualifying at Spa, 3/4 of a second. That wasn't really an accurate representation, but he was comfortably quicker that weekend. He was better on tyre management in the race. So he is the guy who, right now, if you were to put money on it, Leclerc is the guy you would back. So this is giving Ferrari a lot to think about, because the nominally junior partner is the guy who's leading the way ahead of this quadruple world champion. And unless Vettel can change the dynamic and get back on top, then the team will inevitably gravitate towards Leclerc. Racing teams don't kind of congregate around the lesser driver normally, maybe for a very, very short time if it's the established one, but in the case of Leclerc, he appears to be the better prospect. It could be down to compatibility with the car. He struggled a bit less with some of the understeer characteristics, the weak front end, than Vettel has, but it could also be a general trend, and if it keeps on going, they're going to think, actually, this is the guy who's going to win us the world championship. The one thing we just should add is that it was race circumstances that led to the way the strategies worked out. So I don't think they went into the race thinking, oh, we'll use Vettel as a blockade and stop him early. They had to stop Vettel earlier because he was in a bit of trouble in his race situation. So that again tells you that it's Leclerc who is the guy who is on top. So as we build up towards next season, is he the man more likely to deliver Ferrari a world championship?
Ben, that's got to play on Vettel's mind. It's now been a year since he won as well. So for him, going forward with the rest of the season, looking into next season as well, what has he got to do, and what is his mindset now, do you think?
Well, Vettel, really, he needs a complete reset. It feels to me like the defeat he suffered in Canada, where he qualified on pole, had the race won until he went off the track in front of Lewis Hamilton, and then we had that much talked about incident where he rejoined unsafely and was penalised. That seemed to break him, I think. I don't think he's driven with the same spirit since losing that victory, and it's no coincidence that Leclerc has come into the ascendancy, as Ed described, since that event. He needs to try and establish himself, or re-establish himself, as the team leader at Ferrari. I think we should qualify everything with the knowledge that Ferrari isn't performing at the level it or he expected coming into this season, and Vettel doesn't tend to thrive in circumstances where he knows the car isn't capable of fighting regularly for race wins or for the championship. So if Ferrari can do a better job with next year's car, give him the front end that he craves to go quickly, he's very like Kimi Raikkonen in that sense, then maybe we'll see the Vettel of old and we'll see a better fight between him and Leclerc. But he's clearly not performing to the level that you'd expect for a four-time world champion, and it's a very unedifying spectacle to see him basically being used as a number 2 blockade driver to assist his much younger and much more inexperienced teammate.
In fact, from what Ben was saying, though, even at Spa at the weekend, Vettel did make a comment that as far as he's concerned, he won Canada, so it's still there in his mind. But what we've seen in the past, for example, when Daniel Ricciardo came into Red Bull in 2014 and outperformed him, Vettel didn't really fancy hanging around for the fight. So I think it's a question of whether Vettel is able to dig deep and build himself up. Inevitably, when you've got a driver who's established and has won 4 world championships against a young guy, sometimes the one whose expectations are higher, they will wane a little bit. For Leclerc, this is all very new. Even finishing on the podium is still quite new for him in Formula One, let alone winning races. So it's easy for the motivation to be up, but it doesn't take long for these generational shifts to be happening. And if you're Vettel, even though he's not that old, he's got plenty of years still left in him, if he wants to, he'll be looking at it and thinking, okay, have I actually got it in me to fight this, or does he need to walk away, not necessarily from Formula One, but from Ferrari, and go somewhere else to try and rebuild things, just as he did for 2015 when he felt he needed a change from Red Bull.
Yeah, you've both mentioned the blockade side of things and Vettel playing the strategic game there. Obviously, we've seen Ferrari on quite a few occasions this year get the strategy calls wrong. This time they got it right, they got their first win. What will that mean for Ferrari as a team, lifting them going into their home race next?
Oh, it's absolutely massive. It's the phrase you always use is the monkey off the back, but I think to be honest, it's got beyond that, because I imagine the desperation just to get a win and say, look, we can do this, because they've had opportunities before this season. They should have won a couple of races at least, and you can say on the road they did in Canada, but not in the record book. So it's a huge boost for a team, and it will be a pressure release valve, particularly going to Monza. We know this is a team that is quite sensitive to the Italian media and its opinions, and going into Monza, where the anticipation and the media coverage will reach fever pitch, to at least come off the back of a win means that really tough questions won't be being asked, and it'll just make the whole Monza weekend a little bit more relaxed, and in turn, setting aside the fact the car should suit Monza, it'll make the whole weekend much easier for them.
So the whole Belgian Grand Prix weekend showed Ferrari at its best and its worst. We saw the engine power, we saw the race pace, and the tyres isn't quite there as well. But sort of looking to the rest of the season now, where is Ferrari in that pecking order, and where is it going to be competing at more conventional circuits, if you like?
It's very difficult to see Ferrari winning any more races beyond Monza. You look at the circuit layouts of Spa and Monza and think, well, that's nailed on for Ferrari's characteristics, and we saw that play out in Spa. They are considered to have by far the best engine package in Formula One now. The other three are converging, and Ferrari are still a step ahead. But conversely, that strength also highlights their weakness. When you see at Spa how far they are ahead on the straights, that's also a function of the lack of downforce that car's produced this year, a result of the concept they picked for these new aerodynamic regulations coming into this season. And in the race, we can see how they just struggle to keep the tyres under control. Lacking the downforce means you just slide the tyres that much more, and Mercedes come much more into the picture behind them. So you'd expect Ferrari to have an advantage at Monza overall, but lots of slow corners where Mercedes are really strong, so it could be tighter than we expect, particularly in race trim. And if Ferrari finished the season with only one win, that's a terrible return for a team that was supposed to enter this season in championship contention.
And we should say that Spa was a great circuit for them, and the fact that it was a victory by the skin of their teeth is a concern for them. So it shows how far they've got to go on the chassis side, on the aero side, in order to deliver. And even if this guy, Charles Leclerc, is their lead driver next year, is the car going to be good enough to fight for the World Championship? I don't think the driver lineup is their primary problem right now.